Okay, let's dive into something truly fascinating. We're talking about George Carlin. Just hearing that name, you probably conjure up, well, a whole gallery of images, right? The impeccably slick-haired TV comic, then the long-haired counterculture icon, the angry, insightful social critic. How did one individual undergo such profound transformations, not just in appearance, but his entire comedic philosophy, and ultimately leave such an undeniable seismic mark on both comedy and broader culture? That's our mission today, a deep dive into the life and, well, the singular mind of a true original.
Yeah, and what's particularly compelling about Carlin's journey is how his evolution, from simply a class clown to a profound comic philosopher, how it was intricately woven with his changing relationship to language itself, and perhaps even more importantly, to authority. For this deep dive, we're heavily drawing from James Sullivan's biography, Seven Dirty Words, The Life and Crimes of George Carlin. Our goal is kind of to use Carlin's story as a shortcut, really, to understanding the sheer power of words, the enduring importance of questioning everything, and to trace his path from truly unexpected beginnings all the way to becoming this linguistic provocateur who, believe it or not, took his fight for free speech all the way to the Supreme Court.
Wow. Okay, so Carlin's story really does start with some surprising twists. Like you said, unexpected. You might not imagine that a future counterculture icon was actually conceived during a period of his parents' separation in Rockaway Beach, Queens. His mother, Mary, apparently even contemplated an abortion before being influenced by a painting of her own mother. But beneath the surface, I guess, of his early life, a less obvious thread was Carlin's developing fascination with performance and language. He learned early the pleasure of entertaining, right? Mimicking Mae West for his mother's secretarial pool, and getting, quote, "as that I never got in school just for acting out." That early applause, that immediate approval, must have been hugely formative for him.
Indeed. Oh, absolutely. This early drive for approval, coupled with the energetic, often chaotic environment of his ethnically eclectic neighborhood near Grant's Tomb in New York, it certainly fueled a natural curiosity in young Carlin. But it also laid the groundwork for an early foundational distrust of authority. For example, Mad Magazine, which was a significant influence, wasn't just funny to him, it actively taught him to mistrust authority, to read between the lines, to take nothing at face value. And this skepticism, it only intensified when his first communion left him profoundly disenchanted, questioning beliefs they couldn't prove. That moment clearly foreshadowed his later challenges to dogma and, conventional thinking.
Right. So it sounds like his youth wasn't just mischievous, but really a lengthy experiment in tweaking authority, as this source puts it. How exactly did these early acts of rebellion, like shoplifting film for his camera or even showing classmates colored erasers he called heroin, how did that not just hint at his future, but actively shape his unique brand of subversion, his understanding of the game, so to speak?
Well, they absolutely shaped it. These weren't just like childish pranks. They were early lessons. Lessons in identifying weak points in the system and using wit or performance to exploit them. And the fact that he was even rewarded for his show business skills, being allowed to write a play to graduate after getting into trouble at school instead of facing expulsion, that shows that even then, his ability to perform and articulate was seen as valuable, maybe sometimes unruly, but still an asset. It taught him the power of narrative, of self-expression as a form of negotiation almost.
And his love for words and subversion also found an early, powerful outlet in radio.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. While other kids were listening to, I guess, timid fictional boys, Carlin was tuning in to truly irreverent hosts, Fred Allen, Bob and Ray, and especially Henry Morgan, the guy who would mock his sponsors, deliver satirical weather reports like snow, followed by little boys with sleds. It sounds like Carlin was just absorbing these influences like a sponge. What specifically about these early radio guys do you think most directly foreshadowed Carlin's own later stuff, his unique voice?
It's clear, I think, that these hosts modeled a particular kind of comedic freedom for Carlin. They showed him you could be smart, critical, and incredibly funny, all while, challenging conventions. Henry Morgan, especially, with his mockery and those satirical weather reports. That clearly provided a blueprint for Carlin's own creations, most notably Al Sleet, right? His hippy-dippy weatherman character delivering these absurd philosophical forecasts. These early influences weren't just entertainment for Carlin, they were like a masterclass in how to use language and persona to critique society, offering a direct lineage to his later, more confrontational material. They taught him the power of speaking against the grain.
Okay, so Carlin's professional journey then began in an even more unconventional way. He broke into radio not as some aspiring DJ, but as a radar technician at Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana. And somehow he managed to snag a gig spinning records on Carlin's corner. But even there, his rebellious nature couldn't be contained, apparently. He was in near constant trouble, court-martialed 3 times. One instance involved telling a tech sergeant to go fuck himself after passionately celebrating the Dodgers winning the World Series. Carlin, always rooting for the underdogs. He eventually got a general discharge under honorable conditions as unproductive. So even in the military, Carlin's anti-establishment streak was just undeniable, refusing to conform. How did this early rebellion shape his comedic voice, even on the air? And what did that voice sound like back then?
Well, his military experience, ironically, it just solidified his anti-authority stance. Being deemed unproductive by the establishment probably only reinforced his belief that genuine expression often clashed with rigid systems. On the air, though, he was developing something truly unique, his one-of-a-kind voice. It started out mellow, quizzical, but over time it evolved into that hard-earned rasp we all know so well. Listeners described it as very warm, one-on-one sounding, making them feel like he was speaking directly to them. This ability to forge a personal connection through his voice, even while being a troublemaker, that was key. He'd even prank listeners, once doing 2 whole hours in a British accent without anyone noticing, just demonstrating that early knack for playing with character and linguistic identity that would become his hallmark.
That ability to connect, even while being subversive, that's fascinating. Okay, so his move to Fort Worth then brought him to KXOL and a reunion with Jack Burns, a former Boston roommate. And together they navigated what was truly a comedy renaissance in the late 1950s, a period heavily influenced by groundbreaking figures like Mort Sahl, Shelley Berman, and of course, the martyred Lenny Bruce. Carlin, who was initially apparently fairly conservative in his comedic approach, was really pushed by Burns to fight bigotry and intolerance, which sounds like it truly ignited his social conscience, maybe, set him on a new path.
It was absolutely a pivotal period. They honed their act at Fort Worth's pre-hippie, but definitely post-beatnik coffee house, The Cellar. Here, they developed a repertoire of these wrong-headed, inflexible stock characters and even directly satirized Beat Generation archetypes like their performance poet Herb Coolhouse. This wasn't just character work, though, it was a deeper engagement. This time was crucial for developing their comedy affinity and learning how to challenge the country itself, beyond just observational humor. They were actively poking holes in societal norms, using comedy as a tool for deconstruction, not just like lighthearted entertainment.
And their big break sounds almost like a scene out of a movie. Lenny Bruce himself saw their act at Cosmo Alley in Hollywood and reportedly told agent Jack Sobel, "Get these boys signed." That led to a contract with General Artists Corporation, GAC. They even did an uncanny JFK impersonation for the Tonight Show audition. But their actual debut was with guest host Arlene Francis, and those early club dates were often, let's just say, in some really great toilets. Audiences weren't always amused, apparently, like Joseph Kennedy at a Playboy Club. It truly highlights the challenging road, doesn't it, that early comedians often face to find their audience.
Absolutely. And their manager, Murray Becker, who incidentally had served in the Navy with Bruce, he recognized their raw potential. He saw their ability to work clean for radio, but also their underlying intentionally confrontational edge. So despite those early struggles and the less than glamorous venues, this period was vital. It laid the foundation for Carlin's future. He was learning to leverage comedy to challenge authority and the establishment directly. It wasn't merely about creating funny characters anymore. It was about using his platform to make a statement, really preparing him for the legendary battles to come.
Okay, here's where his evolution gets even more profound, I think. Carlin's lifelong fascination with language. It actually stemmed partly from his mother's father, who would meticulously copy Shakespeare by hand, can you imagine? But his most famous routine, 7 words you can never say on television, well, it was much more than mere titillation. It was, as the source describes it, an airtight example of Carlin's belief in the power of reason. This wasn't just shock value. It was a deeply philosophical stance on language.
It really was. And this raises an important question for us, doesn't it? Why, out of the, 400,000 words in the English language, were these specific 7 considered absolutely off limits for broadcast? Carlin's act didn't just spark a national debate, it forced a legal reckoning, one that, despite initial setbacks, fundamentally reshaped the very definition of indecency in broadcast media. His Milwaukee Summerfest arrest in 1972, where he performed in faded jeans and open-toed sandals and got charged with disorderly conduct for his filthy words routine, that was a pivotal moment. And the situation was even more fraught, apparently, with police finding a small envelope of cocaine, which his wife Brenda quickly had passed off by a band member. It just highlights the high stakes and the chaotic energy surrounding him at the time. time. This wasn't merely about 7 words. It was a precedent-setting battle. It elevated artistic freedom and, adult autonomy over what we hear into a national discussion, directly challenging these deeply ingrained societal taboos.
Wow. Yeah, and the legal battle truly escalated when New York's WEII radio station dared to broadcast the routine, the whole thing. A complaint from a man named John H. Douglas, driving with his young son, went directly to the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, arguing for blatant disregard for the public ownership of the airwaves. End quote. And this complaint was passionately championed by Morality in Media, an organization spearheaded by Father Morton A. Hill, who had co-authored the dissenting Hill-Link Minority Report, a significant counter-argument to an earlier government commission on obscenity. It just highlights how contentious and deeply divided this issue truly was. The stakes for free speech were incredibly high.
They were huge. The FCC's ruling characterized Carlin's words as indecent and strategically focused on the broadcast's timing, specifically when children are in the audience. Now, this was a subtle but crucial move because they claimed channeling behavior, meaning they weren't banning the words outright, but trying to channel them to times when kids wouldn't be listening, rather than, outright censorship. However, Justice William J. Brennan's powerful dissenting Supreme Court opinion, he argued forcefully that Carlin's routine actually diffuses the taboo by exposing its absurdity. He asserted that adults' right to receive information far outweighed the minimal discomfort of an offended listener simply changing the station. Easy enough, right? He famously called the majority's decision an acute ethnocentric myopia, meaning he believed the court's decision was narrow-minded based on a specific cultural viewpoint and just failed to grasp the broader implications for free expression and adult audiences. It was a really powerful argument against the moral policing of the airwaves.
And the ripples of this battle just continued for decades. It wasn't over. The cognitive scientist Steven Pinker later called Representative Doug Ose's Clean Airwaves Act, which aimed to basically codify the Milwaukee 7 into law, even substituting asshole for tits in its legislative text, if you can believe that. Pinker called it the filthiest piece of legislation ever considered by Congress. Quite a statement. Carlin's argument for language freedom was just profoundly validated, not simply by his initial arrest, but by the ongoing societal discomfort and legislative attempts to control speech that followed. It showed the truly lasting power and controversial nature of those words, and Carlin's unique ability to expose deeper societal anxieties. So after being famously fired from the Frontier Hotel for God and country jokes, Carlin felt apparently a strange sense of elation. He recalled thinking, they did the job for me, they broke it off, this is good. This firing seemed like a real catalyst. He truly embraced his rebellious nature, heavily influenced by Paul Krasner's The Realist magazine, which he lauded for its incredible satire, revolution, and just plain disrespect. It sounds like this was a turning point where he stopped hiding behind these things. The silly characters television often rewarded, and became truly in his act anymore. He found his authentic, unfiltered voice.
Absolutely. And this period really reflects Arthur Koestler's concept of the jester evolving into the philosopher and then the poet through critical thinking and, dazzling language. Carlin consciously sought a truly detached point of view, proclaiming, I don't really identify with America or the human race. I think I have found an ideal emotional detachment. Now, this wasn't just philosophical, it was often forged through profound personal struggles, including his well-documented battles with addiction during this era. These experiences frequently fueled his cynical yet deeply insightful observations about society and even his own life, giving his humor this raw, authentic edge. Like the ancient Greek philosopher Democritus, he saw humor as essentially the only logical response to a crazy world. This detachment allowed him to observe, analyze, and dissect human behavior without being consumed by it.
That detached point of view, though, it sounds almost cold, doesn't it? Like a renunciation of human connection. But could it also be seen as maybe a necessary distance for truly sharp social commentary? A way to observe without being consumed by the absurdities he was critiquing? And this evolving persona also led to his distinctive look, that long hair, the ponytail, wearing airbrushed t-shirts on The Tonight Show. A stark contrast to typical suited guest host back then. This was also when he started doing HBO specials, right? Which provided him with a crucial platform to perform uncensored sets and deliver these new writerly pieces, like his critique of doublespeak, for example.
It absolutely was a necessary distance, I think. And HBO provided the perfect canvas for it. He needed a space where his unruly urges could truly flourish without the constraints of network television. His critique of doublespeak, which for our listeners means that deceptive, evasive, or deliberately ambiguous use of language, a concept he credited William Lutz's book for, and his powerful Planet is Fine rant. These are prime examples of this. He wasn't just telling jokes anymore, he was dissecting the language and the lies we tell ourselves. And yeah, that visual transformation on The Tonight Show was a deliberate statement, a nonverbal rebellion announcing that a new Carlin had arrived.
That brings up such a fascinating duality, though, because despite his increasingly angry and cynical persona in later years, Carlin exhibited this surprising softness, even becoming the warm grumble voice of Mr. Conductor on the PBS Kids show Shining Time Station.
Exactly, and the irony runs even deeper. The liberator of four-letter words was reading children's stories that were adapted from a clergyman's books. It truly highlights the complexity of his character, showing he wasn't just one thing, one persona. He even famously brought a teddy bear to the sand booth to tell stories to. I mean, that just paints such a vivid picture of that profound duality, proving that the man who wanted to tear down societal hypocrisy also had this deeply gentle side.
Yeah, it's incredible. So beyond the evolving persona and the underlying philosophy, let's consider the craft itself. How did Carlin actually produce this groundbreaking material? He wasn't just an ad-libbing performer. He was a remarkably diligent writer, famously saying, I write the shit out. I'm not an ad-libber. He meticulously crafted his material, which is a distinct approach from even his idol Lenny Bruce, who was known more for his improvisational genius. This dedication led to best-selling books like Brain Droppings and Napalm and Silly Putty. And he also acted in films, right, like Dogma and Jersey Girl, often playing characters that kind of echoed his stage persona as these free agents, men genetically incapable of lying down for authority.
That meticulous writing process, his devotion to language and structure, that is crucial to understanding his lasting impact. He wasn't just shouting, he was building arguments, brick by careful brick. And his final recognition, receiving the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor, was just a profoundly fitting capstone to a career dedicated to what he might call the truth in her eyes ever beaming kind of honesty. His influence is so evident in comedians like Stephen Wright, who maintain that same observant outsider perspective. Carlin continually challenged us to examine the mundane and the profound, shifting our perspectives on everything from the words we use to the systems we live under.
So, from a mischievous kid just seeking applause to a linguistic warrior battling for free speech and eventually a celebrated comic philosopher, George Carlin's journey was anything but linear. He navigated censorship, personal demons, and ever-changing industry. But through it all, he was always striving for what he called the only A's I wanted: approval, attention, and applause. But from his audience, an audience he spent a lifetime challenging.
Yeah, his profound and often uncomfortable insights truly came from his unique relationship with language and his relentless questioning of societal norms. Carlin famously said, if you're born in America, you get a front row seat to the freak show, and some of us get to write about it and talk about it. He not only observed that freak show, but often became a central part of it, maybe, to make us truly see ourselves and our society more clearly. So what does that say about the essential role of comedy in revealing inconvenient truths, especially today, in an age where information is abundant, but true insight feels ever scarcer? Something to think about.